Okay, so forget literally everything you think you know about Africa's development struggles. Today, in this explainer, we're diving into some raw, undeniable data that is going to completely shatter conventional wisdom. This landmark paper proves an absolute mathematical tragedy, so get ready to have your assumptions turned upside down.
When people ask why Africa struggles with poverty, what's usually the first guess? Right. It's always corruption. Or maybe terrible geography. Or ancient historical rivalries. We naturally tend to blame these modern failures. But honestly, the conventional wisdom is just dead wrong. The devastation we're looking at today isn't just bad luck, and it's not simply bad governance. It is a direct, mathematical result of European colonizers drawing completely arbitrary, straight lines right through the middle of ethnic homelands. We're talking about a literal ruler slapped on a map in 1884 that ended up costing millions of lives. Let's dig into the numbers.
Section 1. History's cruelest blind test. Check out this number, 80%. 80% of African borders follow perfect, rigid coordinates, latitudinal and longitudinal lines. No mountains, no rivers, zero respect for existing kingdoms. They were drawn by people sitting in rooms thousands of miles away who had literally never even set foot on the continent. And the arrogance here is just staggering. British Prime Minister Lord Salisbury actually joked about it. He basically laughed about giving away mountains and rivers and lakes, saying they were only hindered by the small impediment that they never knew exactly where they were. They were carving up an entire continent totally blindfolded. So researchers looked at this as history's cruelest blind test. They compared ethnicities that got chopped in half by these borders against those that somehow managed to stay intact. And the baseline they found is terrifying. Before the borders were drawn, these groups were virtually identical. Same resources, same water access, same pre-colonial wealth. The artificial line is literally the only difference. Moving to Section 2, Bloody Truth in Data. The data hits you like an absolute hammer. Conflict intensity is 40% higher in the historical homelands of these partitioned groups. 40%! That is not some slight statistical uptick. It's a massive, systemic explosion of violence, entirely localized to the exact people sliced in half by those colonial pens. When researchers mapped out over 64,000 georeference incidents of political violence, the contrast was absolutely wild. In non-split homelands, the baseline is totally normal. But the second you cross into a split homeland, violence just rockets upward. Severity, duration, all of it. It's a night and day difference, mapped down to the exact geographic coordinate.
Section 3. Neighboring hands and systemic suppression.
Now, this violence doesn't just spontaneously happen out of nowhere. The mechanics are tragically predictable. Step 1, the border divides a group. Step 2, neighboring countries start using those fractured groups to fund proxy wars. Step 3, the national government begins viewing these people as existential threats and heavily marginalizes them. And finally, step 4, endless civil war erupts. If you look at the data for battles in East Central Africa, they don't happen randomly. They cluster like a virus directly along those arbitrary straight lines. It's crazy. Just a few miles away, non-split homelands are completely peaceful. The artificial border itself is quite literally a magnet for bloodshed. Statistically, being born into a partitioned ethnicity is a complete trap. The numbers show you face a 7% higher chance of state discrimination and up to a 14% higher likelihood of participating in an ethnic civil war. The system is rigged against these folks from birth, all because of where their ancestors happened to be standing in 1884. You've probably seen the Somali flag before, but I bet you didn't know the dark history behind it. That 5-pointed star isn't just a neat design choice. It represents a single people chopped into 5 distinct pieces by colonial powers, spread across Somalia, Ethiopia, Djibouti, and Kenya. It's a literal blueprint for endless, deeply rooted conflict. Because these borders slice right through deep ethnic ties, the conflicts just can't be contained. Military interventions from adjacent countries end up multiplying exponentially. The chaos completely ignores the border, mostly because the people living there never asked for the border in the first place. Section 4, the centuries-spanning livelihood cost. But listen, the cost isn't just measured in civil wars. It's paid every single day by regular families. Researchers surveyed over 85,000 households across 20 countries, and the verdict is undeniable. Individuals from split groups have fewer household assets, poorer access to running water, and worse educational outcomes.
They are measurably poorer than their non-split neighbors living in the exact same country. And here is the absolute wildest part. This economic suppression runs so deep, it actually travels with them. If a member of a partitioned group packs up and moves to a completely different city, they still suffer the exact same poor outcomes. The curse isn't attached to the land, it's attached to the people.
Finally, Section 5, Great but Flawed Research.
Now, to be totally fair in this explainer, we have to ask, could this monumental data be flawed? The theory relies on a perfect blind test, but reality is always a bit messy. The researchers actually had to use ethnographic maps from 1959 to guess where people lived way back in 1884, which obviously ignores decades of massive human migration. There are definitely other flaws to consider too. There are known measurement errors in the conflict databases they used. Plus, not every single border was totally random. Some actually followed French administrative lines. So you have to wonder, do these errors invalidate the whole thing?
Well, actually, no. They rigorously controlled for all of it. They adjusted for the map timing, accounted for the French lines, and cleaned up the database errors. And the result? The data remains terrifyingly clear. Even after all the statistical corrections, the artificial line itself is undeniably the primary driver of the chaos. So we leave you with this final thought to stop your scrolling. We constantly look at Africa and ask what the continent is doing wrong. But if its deepest scars were mathematically drawn by foreign empires with a ruler, how can we ever expect to fix it with just aid money? The borders might be fake, but the consequences are incredibly real. Thanks for joining us for this explainer, and keep asking the hard questions.